Welcome back, Wolfpack. Verlis here, and this is how to use Garchomp. So Garchomp is a pseudo-legendary Pokemon, which means that it has a base stat total of 600, therefore pseudo-legendary. It's somewhat legendary with a very high base stat total, and the distribution of Garchomp is pretty crazy. Now we have 130 in the attack, 102 in the speed, so not only do we outspeed base 100 speed Pokemon, we outspeed the very small amount of base 101 speed Pokemon, so it puts us in a really interesting speed tier. It's not like we're overwhelmingly super OP fast or anything, but we're still fast enough to outspeed a good amount of Pokemon. I wouldn't say it's like hyper sweeper fast, but still good. And again, 130 attacks, there's a lot of damage backing it, and then just crazy defenses for no reason almost, at 108 hit points, 95 on the defense, and then 85 on the special defense. This is what I dream to see on some tanky Pokemon, and here we just have almost like a bruiser level of Pokemon that he comes in, does a lot of damage, can soak up a good amount of hits, and that's going to make Garchomp pretty powerful. However, Garchomp is a ground dragon type Pokemon, so even with all that tankiness, it doesn't matter if it encounters any kind of ice type moves, and also with the weakness to Fairy and Dragon, there are quite a few threats out there to Garchomp, so that's just one of the things when you carry Dragon plus another thing that's weak against ice, Dragon Flying, Ground Dragon. Whatever it is, it's pretty crazy. Now, Garchomp does have some good resistances though. Poison, Rock, Fire, and the immunity to Electric. That's going to be very strong for the typing, and Ground Stab with that Earthquake on a physical Pokemon is always very powerful. So hopping into Pokemon Showdown, we're going to see how to use Garchomp, and you have a lot of different options with Garchomp. That, as you can see up here, we can run Garchomp pretty much however you need it on your team. That if you need a Pokemon to tear down your opponent's tanks, this Life Orb Garchomp is for you. That you just come in, use Earthquake, you use Outrage, Stone Edge, Crunch, just a lot of high base power moves. Earthquake, that's going to get ridiculous amounts of stab. Outrage, as long as you knock out your opponent's fairy Pokemon and then you just commit to the damage, if you're finding those outspeeds, kind of doesn't matter, so then Outrage is going to be overwhelming amounts of damage, because with the 130 attack and Life Orb and stab boosting with a 120 base power, a lot of Pokemon are going to take a serious hit to that. And we also have Stone Edge, just going to be extra coverage, and Crunch. So Crunch is going to be good, just dark type coverage that lets you sneak in on some ghost type Pokemon with Levitate like that, and get a super effective hit, which is always nice. Now when we look at how we're going to be running this, I was thinking Jolly Nature. Jolly Nature means you're getting that speed in there, you're making sure you're faster than the 100 speed Pokemon, or anything that's like 105, 110, that's investing in an offensive nature. This is what I mean, you're in the middle. You're not going to be like outspeeding everything, but you're in just in a place where you can confidently outspeed most Pokemon. So you want to play it like that, and then you just use it for those outspeeds, go for the damage, and eventually, with all this bulkiness, it's a lot of natural bulk. So you can come in, do a hit, take a hit, KO. Do a hit, take a hit, KO, and depending on what Garchomp is eating, as long as it's not super effective hits, it's going to have a pretty good time against your opponent. After that, we have Scarf Chomp. So Scarf Chomp is pretty much the same idea, that we want to come in, want to go for the crazy amounts of damage, and then we just kind of back it up with an Adamant Nature this time. Now, for some reason, I see a lot of people trying to put like a Naive or Jolly Nature on a Choice Scarf Garchomp, and that doesn't really make sense. My philosophy with running something like this is that if you're going to be running a Speedy Nature, you go with the Choice Specs or the Choice Band. If you're going to be running the Offensive Nature, that's where the Scarf comes in. Because why do you need more than 450 speed unless you're looking to outspeed other Scarf Pokemon? But if you're outspeeding other Scarf Pokemon, then you already know what attack they're using, and you can either play around it differently instead of just having to bring in the Garchomp for the outspeed, and now you're Scarf locked. I think that I'd rather just come in, get an outspeed on my opponent's base sweeper that doesn't have any kind of crazy stat boost going on, and just get as much damage as possible to secure the knockout. You come in with an Adamant Earthquake with Stab, nothing is going to want to take that hit, it's going to be enough damage right there to where that's kind of all you need, and then your Scarfs, you follow up, you Revenge KO with the Scarf Chomp, and then you're pretty much guaranteed damage on whatever your opponent brings in next, unless it's a very tight Pokemon using Outrage. But anyway, a choice item with Outrage, still pretty good synergy, Stone Edge, and that's pretty awesome right there. Then next up, we have Swords Dance Garchomp. Swords Dance Garchomp is one of the scariest things in the game, because what happens is, if there's a slower Pokemon, that we've already talked about this 102 speed, so you go Jolly, max out the attack, max out the speed. If you have a slower Pokemon that's trying to set up, you just bring in Garchomp. Or if you need a really solid Revenge Pokemon, you bring in Garchomp on a Pokemon that can't deal with Garchomp, so they switch out, you get a free Swords Dance, and then the opponent realizes they made a huge mistake. What you want to do is you want to use this as a really hard mind game, that they bring in Garchomp, it's like, alright, he's going to go offensive and pick me off because he's a Revenge Pokemon, then Swords Dance, and now, really, it's going to be pretty rough, that if your opponent doesn't directly outspeed you with a one-hit KO, you're in trouble. The reason why I like having Lum Berry is if they try to do some kind of shenanigans and use a Will-O-Wisp on you, cool, that was a free turn for Swords Dance, now damage, and now your opponent really has no response whatsoever, so that's going to be pretty powerful. Now here's the cool thing about Garchomp as well, that it outspeeds a lot of Fairy-type Pokemon. So your Pokemon like Sylveon, Pokemon like Florges, a lot of just your basic Fairy-type Pokemon are going to get outsped, which is why sometimes you'll see Ironhead carried on a Garchomp. But this is also where things kind of get interesting. Ironhead, it has base 80 power, so hitting it super effective is only 10 less power than if you're landing an Earthquake. So with this, you can kind of have whatever coverage you want. You know, I have seen Aqua Tail on these Garchomps just for that water coverage, for that extra damage against the oddball Pokemon. Crunch, Brick Break, kind of put whatever right here, and it's just going to be too much damage for your opponent. That mostly between Earthquake and Dragon Claw, there's nothing that can really be done. They set up a Swords Dance, you take a hit because you're so bulky, you can't be status, so if they even try to put you asleep or something, you play around it, and then you just win with sheer amounts of damage and potential outspeeds. So that's what makes Garchomp really scary, that in all these situations, though, they come in, they edge out the outspeeds, and then it's good to go. But at the same time, Garchomp, he still has those weaknesses. You don't want a Greninja coming in, you don't want a faster Pokemon with an Ice-type attack coming in on you, because then Garchomp just dies immediately, so you do have to play around that. But if you dedicate some other resources to supporting Garchomp in that way, you have Pokemon that can resist Ice really well, you have Pokemon that can come in and tank those hits, remove Fairy-type Pokemon, then Garchomp's just like, alright, my turn to set up, I come in with the Scarf, I clean up, and Garchomp does have a lot of power in that way. And then last up, we have Super Ultimate Physical Tank Beater Garchomp. So this is actually a Garchomp that's been getting a lot more popular recently, just because people like playing more stall aspects and stuff, and it's a really crazy thing to think about because, well, Garchomp has the ability Rough Skin. So moves hitting Garchomp that make contact end up costing the opponent health. So what you do is you stack a Rocky Helmet on top of that. 1/6 plus 1/8, they almost lose a third of their health just because Garchomp is there, and mostly contact moves are going to be physical. They're contacting, physical, punching kind of moves, you know, Crunch, any kind of connecting move that makes sense, like a punch move, something like that, Brave Bird, anything that makes contact in that way, it's going to show up as like just extra damage, and that's actually why this Garchomp is so favorable right now. That you predict, well, the opponent's going to throw a physical hit that makes contact, switching Garchomp. Now, what people do is they just invest full tank, that they don't care. They go max hit points, max defense, use Garchomp as purely a physical wall to soak up those hits, and then it still does really well, that it comes in and it can do whatever it wants. Sets up Stealth Rock for free because the opponent either has to switch out because it doesn't have any damage options against him, or the opponent just takes damage while hitting them for the Rocky Helmet and Rough Skin. After that, Earthquake, still reliable stab, a lot of good coverage right there, and Dragon Tail. This is still very effective because it breaks any kind of stall aspects. The opponent's trying to set up even a Sableye. Sableye can't do anything to this, he gets burned and then Dragon Tailed out, so there's no setup behind it. And sometimes you'll even see Fire Blast. The reason behind Fire Blast is because it's kind of like an anti-Ferrothorn. That while you could run Fire Fang on Garchomp, it's lower base power, even if it's getting a super effective hit, you're going to be eating a Rocky Helmet potentially, you're going to be taking that Rough Skin damage, so it's extra damage, and really the only trade-off is that with Fire Blast, you're going to be running it as like the accuracy. So 15% like less accuracy, but you're not taking recoil damage, and in some cases you're actually doing more damage. So in those situations, you'll actually see it to where Garchomp is run a bit differently. You won't see the impish nature. You might even see something like a relaxed nature. That way you're not cutting out that special attack, so you're making it to where, you know, you're not sacrificing that damage, you still have some good coverage overall, and the Fire Blast is there for pretty much two Pokemon, Scizor and Ferrothorn, and the occasional maybe you might see a Fortress or something, but overall you're not risking yourself to the contact or other Rocky Helmets. So Stealth Rock, Dragon Tail, a lot of tankiness. It's pretty much just about burning down your opponent while being tanky. You remove a lot of your sweeping potential, but then you become an absolute frustrating mess that, okay, you just switch out every time there's the threat of an ice type attack, you bring it in whenever there's physical going on, and this Garchomp is like the ultimate physical wall that does a lot of work. Eventually get worn down, but overall with the Rocky Helmet and Rough Skin combo, it's going to do more damage than it takes at some point. So it will be beneficial, and then it's a really reliable way of setting up the Stealth Rock because no one wants to try to deal with this Garchomp, so it's just going to get free Stealth Rocks and stuff. So that's pretty much what there is to Garchomp, and you might have noticed, you know, I've left this blank right here. That was also to explain that, you know, with Choice Scarf, you can see the Fire Blast just for those situations. You can carry Iron Head, you can carry any other coverage moves, but Fire Blast, people like it as an option. I feel that some places it has its usage and other places it doesn't, because if you are going to be running Fire Blast, you do have to change up the nature. So instead of running an Adamant nature, we need something that like boosts attack and lowers defense, maybe a lonely nature. That way, since we have higher defense, we're kind of not worried, and just things like that, or we lower the special defense. So it does make you less tanky if you want to run the Fire Blast effectively, but overall it's still pretty good. As for Mixed Garchomp, I'm not a huge fan of Mixed Garchomp because, I mean, it's only an 80 special attack. If you want to be running Garchomp with special attack, just go with a Goodra instead. Honestly, because Goodra is just going to give you better coverage. So you get Fire, you get Ice, you get Poison, you get Dragon, you get all these crazy things. Now, this Garchomp does have access to Earth Power if you run it special, but overall I feel like Garchomp does way better things physically, or way better things as a tank Pokemon. Don't try to be different for the sake of being different in that way. You know, play to Garchomp's stats, not being crazy. And as for Mega Garchomp, Mega Garchomp is more of a doubles Pokemon in a way, or Sandteam, that if you lead with say a Smooth Rock Tyranitar, that's going to be really good for Garchomp Mega because it gets Sand Force. So it's pretty much like a free Life Orb that doesn't damage you back. So you want to run it in that way. Now Garchomp does get slower, so it's weird because it takes the aspects of like tanky Garchomp, but it takes the aspects of Life Orb Garchomp for the damage, and then you just go off. That Steel, Rock, and Ground type attacks get a huge boost. So you want to run the Earthquake, you want to run the Stone Edge, you want to run all sorts of moves, and then you get extra damage from it. Now you don't have the item, so that's your trade-off right there. But then you gain more base stats. You get tankier, you get way more offensive. The Sand Force boosted Earthquake with an Adamant Nature, it doesn't matter. That's why you run Garchomp. You take a hit, you're much more tanky now. So now you're a 3-hit KO Pokemon as long as you're not getting hit super, and then you just one-shot everything with Earthquake. And if it doesn't respond to Earthquake, you one-shot it with a Stone Edge or a Dragon Claw because there's just so much extra damage floating around. And then Sand Force does have that chance of chipping away some extra damage at the end of the turn, so you want to run it like that. As for speed, I would only recommend, actually you don't even need speed investment. I could recommend, like in doubles, have Pokemon set up Sandstorm, then you bring in Tailwind, and then you just outspeed everything for the win. But mostly it's just going to be bulk, and the reason why you don't see Garchomp too much is it loses a lot of that utility, that it doesn't keep its rough skin. So it can't bounce back damage as it's taking hits. It pretty much just has to survive, and then it has to KO back. So it's very one-dimensional when you have a lot of other crazy things that Garchomp can do. So if you guys enjoyed this video, that's how you use Garchomp, and I hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.